Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I have 18 of my Dollar Tree Spring and Easter DIYs that I've put together for you all in one video. If you're new here and you like home decor and DIYs on a budget, make sure to stick around by hitting that subscribe button and ringing the bell for notifications. All right, let's get into the video. For this first wreath, I'm going to do a floral rainbow inspired wreath, and I'm going to use one of these 14-inch round wire wreath forms from Dollar Tree. I'm going to go ahead and wrap some ribbon around the wreath form first. This is going to help me attach my flowers to the wreath form, and then it's also going to help disguise the back of the wreath form when everything is done so it looks more pretty in the back. I did use 1.5 things of ribbon to cover the whole wreath. For my flowers, I chose to use all of the same flowers and use hydrangeas. So I picked colors as close to the rainbow as I could get, but you can choose whatever flowers you would like and you can mix and match. They definitely do have all of the colors of the rainbow at Dollar Tree for their florals, so you could definitely do more of a rainbow if you wanted to. I just like the pastel colors. So all I did was I just removed the flowers from the stems and then I just hot glued them to the wreath, and having that ribbon there made it easier to hot glue the flowers to the wreath form. I used 6 different colors for this wreath. I used 2 bunches of each color, and that gave me a total of 12 bunches of flowers that I needed for this wreath. I think it turned out so pretty and perfect for spring. This next wreath, I'm going to use these little wooden birdhouses from Dollar Tree. They have a few different types, a couple with different roofs, and then a few different openings. I'm going to use 8 in total, and I'm just going to remove the stickers from the bottom. They were really easy to get off, which I was super happy about because typically it's hard to get stickers off of things, but not these little wooden houses. Next, I'm going to use some spray paint, and I just have 4 different colors that give me some spring vibes. You can use whatever colors you like, and I'm going to spray paint 2 houses of each color. So once I get them all done and dry, I can go ahead and arrange them in a circle. So I'm going to arrange them in a circle where the bottoms of the houses touch, so that way I can glue them together. I'm just going to use hot glue to glue mine together. Obviously, using E6000 or wood glue would give you a stronger hold, and also if this is going to be in the sun, you might want to use either of those glues so it won't melt. Once everything though was glued together, I'm going to flip it over, and for some extra reinforcement, I'm going to use one of these willow wreaths from Dollar Tree. It's the smaller ones, and I'm just going to go ahead and hot glue that to the back of the houses, and that will keep everything a little more stable. So after I got the birdhouses all down, I flipped the wreath over, and I was not liking what I saw. There was too many holes, so I decided to get some of these lavender floral picks from Dollar Tree. I believe I had 2 of each color, the white, the light purple, and the dark purple. I just pulled the flowers and the leaves off of the stems, and I hot glued the leaves down first and then hot glued the flowers in between the leaves because it's all separate on the stems, and I started hot gluing those all around in between the houses, and this wreath started coming together, and I absolutely love how it looks now. It's so perfect for springtime. For this next wreath, I'm going to use the bicycle wreath form from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use some of the lavender picks as well. I am going to use 8 in total lavender picks. I have 3 of the white, 3 of the light purple, and then 2 of the dark purple. And I'm going to start off by taking one of the picks, and I'm just going to form it kind of along the wheel there. And to add my picks to the form, I'm going to use this ribbon from Dollar Tree instead of floral wire, because honestly I didn't have any, so this actually worked out perfect. So I just started at the top there and wrapped my ribbon around the first one and hot glued it to secure it down, and then I just kept wrapping the ribbon and then adding my lavender picks as I worked my way around the wreath on one side. And then when I got to the bottom and I added my last lavender pick, I just kept wrapping the ribbon around the stems at the bottom there, so that way this kind of looked like a bouquet, kind of like a bridal bouquet in my opinion. And then you can see I'm going to add a sign there, so I just went as far as I could, or as far as I thought I needed to, and then I cut the rest of the stems off with wire cutters, but I didn't cut enough off, so I added a little bit more ribbon there at the end. And then I am going to add this cute little sign from Dollar Tree that says "Meet me at the garden." I'm just going to hot glue it down to the form and the flower bouquet, and then I took the rest of the ribbon I had left over from the spool and tied a little bow and added that to the bottom there in between the sign and the bouquet. And I love how this wreath turned out for spring. This next wreath is fairy garden inspired. I'm going to use one of these floral foam rings from Dollar Tree and a bag of floral moss. I'm just going to attach the floral moss to the wreath with some hot glue, and this is a very messy process, and the floral moss does shed, so make sure after you're done coating the wreath with the floral moss, give it a coat of clear sealer or some hairspray to keep it stuck down really well. To give it more of a fairy vibe, I guess, I'm going to use some twine and hot glue it to the back of the wreath and then wrap it around the wreath 2 times. And I don't know, I just think this gives it more of like an English garden fairy feel. And then I just used some of the fairy garden statues and figurines that you can get from the Dollar Tree. I hot glued one of the little house figurines to the bottom of the wreath, and then I hot glued a little gnome and another little piece to the side there, and then I just used a little bit of the extra moss I had lying around to fill in the gaps where it didn't completely touch the wreath. And then to add some more extra fairiness to this wreath, you have to add fairy lights. So I grabbed a pack of these from Dollar Tree, they're battery operated, and I just tucked it inside of the twine to begin with, and then I just started wrapping the lights around the wreath form. Once I got all the way around the wreath and back to where the little fairy house is, there is excess wire that doesn't have lights on it at the end of the string. So I just wrapped that up as best as I can. I looped it around like you can see here. And then you can use like a twist tie, but I used a little piece of twine because I didn't have a twist tie, and I just tied that around the loop in the middle of that wire there, and then I'm just gonna hot glue that down to the back of the wreath right underneath the house. I hot glued the battery pack to the back of the house, and this turned out to be a cute wreath. For this first DIY, I'm going to use 4 canvases from Dollar Tree. These are 8 by 10 canvases, and I'm going to reverse canvas them. I'm just going to use a razor blade from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to cut the edges to take off the canvases, and I'm going to place those canvases to the side. Once I get all of the canvases off of the frames, I'm going to go ahead and stain the frames. You can use stain or you can paint them. I'm going to use some acrylic paint from Dollar Tree. It's just brown paint, and I mixed it with a little bit of water, and I'm just going to wipe it on, and it gives a great stain effect. So I'm just going to do that to all 4 of the canvases, and then I am going to let those dry. So while those frames dry, I'm going to take one of the canvases I cut off, and I am going to cut those edges that were wrapped around the canvas off just with some scissors. I want to make sure this canvas is nice and flat because I'm going to be putting it through my printer, and if it's not flat, it's going to get stuck. So once I do that, I printed on a regular piece of paper, and I just made this on canva.com, and I'll leave it linked down below in the description box, but it's free. You can print it yourself. I printed it on a regular piece of paper, and I lined it up with the canvas and the frame just to make sure everything was even and nice, so that way I didn't ruin my canvas before I actually printed on it. So this is like a test piece of paper before I print on my canvas. Now that everything is lined up, I can go ahead and put the canvas in my printer and print off the design right onto my canvas, and it comes out nice and neat. Next, I can go ahead and attach the canvas to the back of my frame with some hot glue, and then if I have some extra canvas laying on the edge, I just use a razor blade and cut that apart. Now I'm going to go ahead and attach the other 3 canvases to the backs of the frames. So I just lined it up, and again, just using hot glue, making sure the canvases are stretched nicely, and then using a razor blade to cut off the edges that stick out from the frame. Now I'm going to use this felt bunny garland from Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to pick 3 of the colors that I like, and I'm going to cut the bunnies from the string. And then I'm going to take those 3 bunnies and I'm going to attach them to the leftover 3 canvases that I have. I just used some hot glue to attach the bunnies to the inside of the canvases. Lastly, I'm going to attach all the canvas frames together, and I'm going to start off with the Happy Easter at the top and then attach the 3 bunnies below it. I just attached each frame to each other with some hot glue. And that was it. This turned out super cute.
I know that I haven't been who I was. I am supposed to be the one you can trust. I feel so useless 'cause I let you down.
For the next DIY, I used one of the shorter metal buckets from Dollar Tree. I also used some of the Dollar Tree black vinyl and used my Cricut to print out the words bunny bait and attach that to the front of my bucket. Instead, you could use the black letter stickers that Dollar Tree sells to spell out the word. I decided to add some of the Dollar Tree buffalo checked ribbon to the top of the bucket over the twine. I just hot glued it down, and then I decided to add a small simple bow to the middle of the top of the bucket. Now to weigh the bucket down, I used some rocks from Dollar Tree, and then I'm going to use some of this raffia also from Dollar Tree. I just used a couple bunches. It comes in a pack of 3, and I just unraveled it and cut a few pieces and just stuffed it inside the bucket. Next, I added 3 packs of these carrots from Dollar Tree, and I just stuffed them inside the raffia in the bucket. These carrots are a little bit larger than the ones that they sold last year, which is awesome. And then they are also selling this cute little bunny bottom on a stick. So I went ahead and just broke off a little bit of the stick so that way it stuck down inside my bucket and the little feet dangled over the edge of the bucket. The last thing I did was use one of these chalkboard signs, and I used a chalk pen and wrote free carrots and added it to the bucket. And this turned out to be such an adorable DIY for Easter.
I can't know what you mean to me, 'cause I don't know what to do if you go. Ooh, ooh, I just don't know what to do.
For this DIY, I'm using one of these wooden hanging signs from Dollar Tree, and I just removed the twine because I don't need the hanger, and then I'm going to stain it with some of that watered down brown acrylic paint from Dollar Tree. And then I printed this cute little saying off of my Cricut with some of the Dollar Tree white vinyl. Now, I did not make this saying. I did get it off of Cricut Design Space, and it's not something that is free, unfortunately. You do have to pay for it or be subscribed to get it, but I just couldn't figure out a way to make anything as cute as what this looked like. I did go ahead and cut the sections of the vinyl out so that way it would be easier to apply onto my board and it would spread out more evenly since my board was a rectangle. And then I wanted to make my holes just a little bit bigger on the one side where the hanger was, and then I wanted to make holes on the other side so that way I could make handles. Now, you want to be careful if you are drilling into this wood because it can break. I did fix it with just a little bit of stain over it and then with these wooden beads. But be very careful. It is a very gentle wood. And so for my handles, I'm just going to go ahead and insert a piece of twine on one side and then string 8 beads on that piece of twine, and then string the other side of the twine through the other hole. And then I did hot glue both beads down on each end to the wood and then tie off the twine on the other end and hot glue it. And that was it. I love how this turned out. It's super cute.
One more chance, I swear I'll try my best to always be there. And I want you to know that I'm lost without you. I'm not without you.
So for this DIY, I picked up one of these welcome mats from Dollar Tree, and my thinking was I was going to make it over for spring. And I was going to use the welcome side to make over, but it just didn't fit in with my design, so I ended up flipping it over to use the back side for my DIY. But it actually works out because now it is a reversible rug. Now for the rug, I'm going to go ahead and use the 4 leftover bunnies from the felt garland, and I'm going to trace the shapes out onto my rug, and I'm just using a chalk pen from Dollar Tree to trace them out. Next, I'm just going to paint each bunny a different color. So the first bunny I just painted with this yellow chalk paint. The second bunny I painted with this green chalk paint. The third one I painted with this Dixie Belle blue chalk paint. And the fourth bunny I painted with this lilac colored chalk paint. I did do 2 coats, and once everything was dry, I came back with some of this white acrylic paint from Dollar Tree, and I used that to make the little bunny tails on the back of the bunny. And that's all there is to this cute little rug for Easter. I did spray it with some Never Wet to seal it. For this last DIY, I'm going to use these colored twine wrapped eggs from Dollar Tree. I picked up 1 pack of each color, and I'm just going to remove the sticks from them just by breaking the sticks at the top. If you do pull them out, be careful. The twine can unravel, but it's easy to glue back on if you do. Next, I'm going to use this piece of floral foam from Dollar Tree, and I didn't unwrap it because originally I was just going to use it to shape the circular shape of my eggs glued together and just kind of hold it together, but not glue the eggs to it, because as you see here, I am just gluing each end of each egg together and then holding it together tightly so that way it forms the circle, and then it also the glue holds it down because it takes a minute for the hot glue to dry. So I wasn't going to use the foam originally because with just this layer you were going to be able to see the floral foam with what I was doing, and I didn't think I had enough eggs to do a second layer. But turns out, you can see here that I was planning and I do have enough eggs to do a second layer. So I ended up just placing that floral foam back in the center there, taking off the wrapper, and then hot gluing it to those eggs. And like I said, it takes a minute for the hot glue to set, so just make sure you're holding it all together. And then I went ahead and hot glued the second layer of eggs around or on top of the first layer of egg. Lastly, I'm going to use what Dollar Tree calls a metal bottle cap, and I'm just going to remove the hanger by cutting off the twine. Then I'm going to place it on top of my eggs. I'm going to use some hot glue to secure it down, and this makes a perfect candle holder for Easter.
I just don't know what to do if you go. I've been so selfish.
For this first DIY, I'm going to use 8 bunches of white tulips from Dollar Tree. I want to make a carrot swag. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any orange flowers at Dollar Tree, so that's why I got the white tulips. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pluck the tulips off the stems and save the stems for later because I'm going to reuse those for this project. So once I got all of the tulips off the stems, I also want to remove the centers of the tulips because I'm going to be painting the tulips and I don't want to paint the centers if I can help it. So I removed all of the black centers and I set those aside because I'm going to be reusing them and putting them back on after we are done painting them. So to paint them, I am going to use this spray paint in rustic orange, and I just laid them all out and spray painted them. You want to do a couple coats and flip them over so that you can get them all covered. And then once they're dry, I just took the stems and I removed the leaves because I'm not going to use the leaves. And then I'm going to insert the black centers back into the tulips and then put the tulips back on the stems. Now that the tulips are put back together, I'm going to go ahead and take one stem of them and lay that down. And then I'm going to take 2 more stems and I'm going to kind of stagger them on the side of that first stem and then grab all 3 of those stems and bunch them together. And then you can use floral wire. I couldn't find my floral wire, so I had this wired twine from Dollar Tree. So I just used that and I just twisted it around. I used a little bit of hot glue to make sure that the wire stayed down and wrapped it around the bunches. Now I'm gonna add 2 more bunches of tulips above those first 3, and I'm just going to continue to do that up with the other 2 bunches, wrapping the twine each time and making sure it's secure. Then I added the last bunch right there in the middle and wrapped some more twine and added a little bit of hot glue. And then what I'm going to do is I need to add the tops for the carrots. So I found these 2 bunches of foliage from Dollar Tree. That's just what they're labeled. I thought they looked perfect as carrot tops, so I just tucked them inside the top of the tulip bunches there. And then with the excess twine I still have, I'm going to wrap that all the way around to make sure that it's really secure, and then again using some hot glue to secure it down. And then I just fanned it out a little bit. Now I flipped it over to the back so that way I could trim up the stems from the tulips on the back side. And now I am going to use some of this burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree to cover up the twine right there in the middle. I'm going to make a big bow. You can use whatever ribbon you have on hand, and I'm just going to tie that off and cut the ends. And this turned out so cute. I love how it looks like a big carrot swag for Easter and springtime. For For this DIY, I'm going to be using an 8x10 canvas from Dollar Tree. I'm going to reverse canvas it, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the canvas. So I flip the canvas over, and to remove the canvas, I found the easiest way is just to score along the edges with a box cutter and just remove the canvas that way and not worry about the staples. And then I am going to stain the canvas with some acrylic brown paint mixed with water. It's the easiest way to stain this canvas, so you don't have to go out and purchase a whole can of stain if you don't want to. Dollar Tree sells this brown acrylic paint. Once the stain is dry, I'm just going to flip it over and I am going to apply the canvas on the back of the frame, and I'm going to reattach it with some hot glue. You can use staples if you'd like, but hot glue works just fine. Just make sure you stretch it tight enough so that way the canvas isn't loose. And then the excess canvas that is around the outside of the frame, you just cut it with a box cutter. Then I'm going to use some of these wooden carrot ornaments from Dollar Tree. They are so cute. So to color my wooden carrots, I am going to mix some paint with some water to stain them like I did with the canvas frame. So for the tops of the carrots, I am using a chalk paint in the color oatmeal. It's kind of like a subtle gray greenish color. And then for the bottoms of the carrots, I'm going to use some of the orange acrylic paint from Dollar Tree, and again just a little bit of water and some paint and just mix it up, and then you can start just brushing on the colors where you want them. They will bleed into each other if you're not careful, so you want to make sure that you stop the color you want a little bit before the next color, so that way it'll kind of blend all together in the end. But this is just going to give the carrots a more subtle farmhousey look, I think. But you can paint them if you want to. I did 11 carrots this way, and then I did one of the wooden bunny ornaments, and I just painted that with some white acrylic paint. I accidentally painted the wrong side of the bunny because I wanted the bunny to look at the carrots in the end, and you'll see. So make sure when you're doing this, you paint the right side of the bunny. So I laid out all of my carrots. I did 2 rows of 4, 1 row of 3 carrots, and then the bunny looking at the carrots. And then I just hot glued everything down. This turned out so cute. For this DIY, I'm going to use 4 of these wooden bunny heads I found at Dollar Tree, and I'm going to go ahead and paint them with some white acrylic paint from Dollar Tree. I did give them probably around 3 coats of paint because this white acrylic paint from Dollar Tree doesn't cover very well, so you definitely want to give them a few coats. But after it dried, I came back with some of this wood stain in the color Briar Smoke, and I just went around the edges with my paintbrush and then wiped it with a paper towel just to give it more of a weathered look. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the bunny heads together, so I just stood 2 of them up next to each other, and then I just hot glued them together, and then put the other 2 opposite of each other and just use a little more hot glue to secure everything down. And then I'm going to place a clay pot from Dollar Tree inside, and I did this up so that way you could still see the bunny ears when you put the flowers inside, and this makes such a cute bunny planter. For For this next DIY, I'm going to use one of these styrofoam craft bunnies from Dollar Tree. I'm also going to use some of this lightweight spackling from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to color it with this folk art chalk paint in the color Castle. I just mixed in a little bit of the color and made sure that I mixed it really well. I'm going to give this bunny a concrete look, a faux concrete look. I did this for one of my Valentine's Day videos with the styrofoam heart from Dollar Tree, and it worked really well. So after I get the color all mixed into the spackling, all I'm going to do is take my little spatula, which I also got from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to spread it on to the bunny just like you would spread on icing to a cake. When you're spreading on the spackle, you don't need to worry about it being smooth. It's going to have some rough spots and it's going to be bumpy. You just want to make sure that you're spreading it on evenly and covering all of the styrofoam as best as you can. And then also you want to make sure that underneath the ears, in between the back and the ears of the bunny, that there's that gap there, because you won't be able to really do anything about that once it dries. And then you can see I inserted a skewer to the bottom of the bunny to make it easier to work on the underside and get that all covered. And also I was able to use that skewer to set it up in a piece of styrofoam to let it dry overnight for 24 hours. And that is what I did. And now it is hard enough to be able to come back and use a sanding block and sand it all smooth. And then once it's all sanded smooth, I decided to add a cute little bow with this ribbon from Dollar Tree. I just tied a bow and then hot glued it to the neck, and that was it. I think this turned out really adorable for Easter or spring decor. For this last DIY, I'm going to use 3 of these wooden carrots from Dollar Tree. I'm just going to remove the hanging parts from them because I don't need them for this project. And then I mixed some of that orange acrylic paint from Dollar Tree with some water, and I used that to stain the bottoms of my carrots. I just painted it on and then let it dry. And for the tops of the carrots, I mixed some of that chalk paint in the color oatmeal, and again I just brushed it on the tops of the carrots to give it that farmhouse subtle look, so it wasn't super bright. And then I wanted to make like the ribbing in the carrots, so I took some watered down white acrylic paint from Dollar Tree and I just lightly brushed Walmart as well, or you can use a wooden dowel from the hardware store, from like Home Depot or Lowe's. It will definitely be stronger if you did that. But I'm just going to line up my carrots and kind of stagger them a little crooked, each one a little crooked, and then hot glue them down to the stick. And then you can see where my stick is showing in a couple spots. So I'm going to use some of this raffia from Dollar Tree. I just used one of the rolls out of the 3-pack and I just cut it and then hot glued it to the back and the front, and then that way it's going to cover up the skewer. Now I'm going to use one of these planters from Dollar Tree, and I am going to use one of these styrofoam blocks also from Dollar Tree. This one is the more heavy duty sturdy one. I would suggest using this white one instead of the green ones. Those ones break apart easily. And I just hot glued it to the bottom of my planter, and then I'm going to stick my carrots with the pointed side of this skewer into the styrofoam, and it still will be a little wobbly and a little top heavy, so I'm going to use a bag of these Dollar Tree rocks to fill the top in and make it more sturdy. Then I just covered the rocks with the rest of that raffia, and this turned out to be really cute. this DIY, I'm going to use one of the 8x10 canvases from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to reverse canvas it. I love using these canvases for all different sorts of DIY projects. So I'm just going to use a box cutter from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to score the back of the canvas from the staples and just peel off the canvas and set the canvas aside to use later. Then I am going to use these wooden dowels from Dollar Tree. I used 4 of them, and I am just going to cut them to the size that I need with scissors. You can use a little hacksaw or whatever works best for you. Scissors worked just fine, but I cut them so that they fit snug in between my frame. So I did 2 longer ones, and then I cut 2 shorter ones for the opposite side. So I put the 2 longer ones in first, and then I flipped it over and I cut the 2 shorter ones, and I put those on the back so that it looked like a tic-tac-toe board or a hashtag or whatever you want to call it. And that is what I'm going to be making, is a tic-tac-toe board with this. So once I got those fit snugly inside the frame, I did want to go ahead and glue them down just to make sure they didn't move. So I just used a little bit of hot glue for this, but you could definitely use wood glue and let it dry, and it would definitely work a lot better because the hot glue dries really fast. So you have to work really quickly getting those back in. And then I wanted to go ahead and stain the whole piece, so I used a little bit of the brown acrylic paint from Dollar Tree mixed with some water, and I just brushed that on to the back and the front of this and let it dry. Now I'm just going to go ahead and reattach the canvas to the back of the frame. You can use whichever side of the canvas you would like to show on the front. And then I'm just going to use hot glue to attach everything. And I used my box cutter to cut the excess canvas from around the edges of the frame. And then for the X's and the O's, I'm going to use these bunnies and carrots from Dollar Tree, and then I'm going to paint both the backs and the fronts of them. I did start off by painting the bunnies with some of this pink acrylic paint, but decided that it just looked too bubblegum pink for me, and I didn't like that. So I decided in the end to change that, and I'll show you here in just a second. The carrots, I used some orange acrylic paint, and then the tops of the carrots, I used just some chalk paint in the color oatmeal. And then here is where I repaint the bunnies. This is some chalk paint in the color castle, and it just looks a lot better with the carrots. After all of these were dry, I put them in one of these little bunny bags, and I think this could be such a cute Easter present for Easter basket, or just a cute piece of decor for Easter. For this DIY, I'm going to use one of the Dollar Tree plungers. I already stained my stick a while back, and I'm just going to remove the plunger part just to use the stick. And I'm going to use one of these foam soccer balls from Dollar Tree. I used my box cutter to cut an X in the center so that way I could take my plunger stick and shove it down in there and use a little hot glue to secure it. Then I'm going to use 8 bunches of these white hydrangeas from Dollar Tree, and I just used some wire cutters to cut the tops off. Now I'm just going to stick the hydrangeas inside the styrofoam ball, starting from the bottom, working my way up towards the top. I did use a little hot glue to secure the ends of the hydrangea stems inside the styrofoam ball, just to make sure it held really well. And I just worked my way around the ball until it was all filled up. Then I took this stuff, which I'm not exactly sure what it is. It's wired, and I love the color of it. So I thought it worked perfect to just wrap around the hydrangea hydrangeas, and then I just cut it off and hot glued the ends to the underside of the stick. Now I'm going to take one of these planter pots from Dollar Tree and a styrofoam block from Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to go ahead and hot glue that block inside the pot, and then I'm going to stick my bottom of my stick inside the styrofoam block and use some hot glue to secure it. Now to fill up that space there, I'm just going to use some paper bags, and then on top I'm going to fill it with some white rocks from Dollar Tree, and I love how this turned out for spring. This next DIY, I'm going to use 3 of these glass candy jar containers from Dollar Tree. At least that's what I'm going to use them for, as candy jars. I'm going to go ahead and remove these stickers off the bottoms. They are pretty sticky, so I did bust out the glue gun for this and scraped off the stickers. After I used that, it was super easy for them to come off. And then I'm going to use the rest of these treat sacks from the first project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the tags from the inside because I don't want those to show, so I just cut those out. And then I removed the lid from one of the jars, and then the lid fits perfectly inside one of these bunny treat bags. So you just slide it in, and then you can just do what you would normally do, and that is tie the twine around the top to make the little bunny ears. I did cut the slit for the bunny ears just a little bit more so that way they would stand out just a little bit more. And then I just went ahead and put the lid back on the jar and did the other 2 the same way. The lid does not close tightly with these on there. They just kind of pop on and pop off, so you won't have a airtight seal anymore. But again, I'm just using this for candy, and it's going to be eaten pretty quickly. Then I used some of these pom-poms from Dollar Tree to put little tails on, and I filled them with some jelly beans and some mini Cadbury eggs, and this turned out super cute for some candy jars for Easter. For this last DIY, I used one of these plastic garden dishes from Dollar Tree. I removed the stickers from the top and the bottom. They were a lot easier to remove than the last ones. And I found these glass mosaic tiles from Dollar Tree. I picked up 4 packages of them, and I used them to cover the inside of the bowl. I just used hot glue to secure them down, but you could definitely use super glue. It would give it a stronger hold, but I didn't have any problem with the hot glue and them coming up or anything like that. So I just hot glued them all around the inside of the bowl. I didn't have any pattern or anything that I was following. You could definitely make a pattern, or you could try to make a picture inside. I just wasn't that creative, and I thought it looked pretty just being sporadic anyways. The only thing I did do is make sure around the top edge of the bowl that I did get a nice layer so that it would be even. And I just continued doing that. Once that was finished, I used some of this lightweight spackle from Dollar Tree to fill in the gaps and the cracks between the tiles. You could definitely use grout if you had some, or you could use the white caulk that Dollar Tree sells. I've used that before, and it's a little bit hard to remove from, well, I didn't use these tiles, but I used the little glass beads from Dollar Tree, and it's hard to remove from those beads, so I figured it would probably be a little bit more hard to remove from these mosaic tiles. So I opted for the lightweight spackle, and I think it worked perfectly fine. It's definitely not waterproof, so you can't use this outside, but I think it looks pretty inside for just like keys or things like that. So after I got the spackle all spread out with the spatula, I came around with my finger and I just lightly wiped around it just to clean off some of the tiles and smooth off the edge, and then I let it dry for 24 hours. Once the inside of the bowl was dry, I flipped it over and I'm going to use some spray paint to cover up the outside of the bowl so that way you can't see the tiles and the spackle. I used the chalk paint in the color Serenity Blue and gave it a couple coats, and I think this turned out super pretty.
Jump into the car on a Friday night, I wanna drive with you. Looking for a bar in the nearest town, I've never seen a sky so blue. We don't ever play it in the night.
Thank you guys so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to give it a thumbs up, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.